Lepo pozdravljeni še na eni prezentaciji. Tokrat bomo predstavili berlinsko riso založbo Colorama. So hello, welcome back or welcome at the presentation of Colorama. Johanna will tell us more about this publishing house, and I will also like to invite you for the exhibition of Colorama is at the moment in Dobra Vaga in the center of the city. V Dobri Vagi v mestu imate prav zdaj tudi razstavo založbe Colorama, ki jo lahko vidite še vsaj nekje tam do konca meseca, na katero ste toplo vabljeni. So Johanna is here with us to tell us a little bit more about Colorama, which we, as I said, at least some of us already saw at the exhibition. Johanna, welcome.
Thank you for this nice introduction. Hello, everyone. It's interesting to not see any one of you. There could be just one person in the audience. I wouldn't know. So I'm so happy to give you this little talk to talk about my practice. And yes, so my name is Johanna, and I run Colorama since 2015. And I started it as a riso printing studio. Probably all of you are familiar with the printing studio because you have this beautiful Riso Paradiso in Ljubljana, as I know. And then later I also started publishing books also under the name Colorama. And then I continued with several programs that I did, like the comic residency Clubhouse that I host together with Aisha Franz. She had a master's class this morning, so maybe some of you got to know her a bit better also. And then also I teach at the university, and I do consultations and workshops and so on and so on. You know, everything that revolves about printmaking and bookmaking. And this is also the reason why I chose this first image of my website here for you to see, because it kind of like separates these four big legs that Colorama is basically resting on. Yes, so in the beginning, this is my old studio. This has been my studio for 6 years, and this is kind of how I started on 18 square meters. It's a tiny little room that at the end had like 2 printers, a lot of paper, and then also a lot of books. And my origin is actually in architecture and urban research. So I'm not a trained designer or publisher or anything. So everything that revolves around bookmaking is self-taught. So I basically started publishing and printing, and I didn't even know that paper has a grain direction, or I didn't really know much about like ink coverage or CMYK. I didn't know the difference between CMYK and RGB, you know, things that you usually learn in your studies. So I gathered these informations like slowly, and in the meantime, I just pretended that I knew and then asked people privately, secretly, to tell me all these things. And yes, I started in the beginning because I really loved the aesthetic of the riso printing. Probably all of you held like a couple of these books in your hands, or these prints in your hands, and then you know that it has this very tactile quality to it. And the reason why I then stayed in this practice and why I continued publishing was very much because I got to know the whole community that is the artist book or self-publishing community. And these people you meet when you go to book fairs, and if you go to workshops or mainly at book fairs, and then you meet other people that print with riso, and then you have conversation, and you have very technical conversations where you talk about what machines do you use and what paper do you use, but you also talk about things like how do you actually make a living, and what you do when a client doesn't pay, or what do you do if you feel like your work isn't really seen in the city that you live in, and so on and so forth. Or how can you create a community? Or things like how do you share your profit with your artists? How do you pay artists, and so on and so forth. And for me, I always had like through Aisha, and also other comic artists that I became friends with, was always very helpful for me to have like this artist perspective really close to me. So when I did like a decision about publishing, if I was thinking about, oh, I want to do this project, I want to involve several artists, I could always talk to Aisha about what she thinks is like a fair or good solution. So I always try to put my mind into the perspective of the artist and try to understand what is important for them. And this broad, like this is now, I don't know how detailed you can see it on the big screen, but this is like an overview of all the books I have published until today. So I think it's like nearly 80 books. And I think 99% of them you can see in the beautiful exhibition in Dobravega. My biggest thank you to Aida and Tanya, how they set it up in my absence. It really looks absolutely stunning from the photos. It looks beautiful. So here you see all of the books that I've published at this point. And then here's some of them, some images of them. As I said, you can look at all of them in the exhibition. And yeah, this is just an excerpt of them. And I think one thing you might notice is that all of the books I published, they look quite different. You know, sometimes I have little zines that are produced very quickly. Then I have also like books with photography, and I have like books that are hardcover bound, books that have like a paper clip or something. And I think what I really like about like making books is that the time span to conceptualize an idea and then to actually be able to produce it yourself is like quite short. So you can actually try something and you see the result, not immediately, but after a bit of time. And then if you don't like, or if you're not really completely happy with the result, you have the idea to redo this project, or you can just move on to the next one. And I think this is why I really like the technique of riso printing, because at this point, I'm able to have a concept, to work with someone, and then to produce everything entirely in my tiny studio. And so basically my labor, my labor I put into it is then, of course, like very time intensive, but the low material costs of the printing give me the possibility and the freedom to try out different things that I find interesting. Yes, this is like, sometimes we also are invited to do exhibitions. This is like a result of it. I think this is Aisha in costume of one of the characters. We always try to have, like, when we do exhibitions, I think, yeah, it's kind of always like a balance act, because I like things to be playful and to be eclectic, and I want them to be fun. You know, I want people to come into this exhibition and feel that they can connect to how it felt for us making these books or making these comic residencies and spend time together. So here you see Aisha, we made an exhibition for one of the big Clubhouse anthologies. And so the anthology always has several different comic contributions by different artists. And then of each comic in the anthology, we chose one character. And then we made these costumes of this character. So this is Aisha wearing a costume from the Melek Zatal comic in the Clubhouse 13. And then we also do, of course, events like readings. Here you see Maren Karlsson, and here is Nino Bulling. And then there's like the only photo I have of an event that was a beautiful reading of the Gnocchi Gnocchi book. And then here's like the backyard of the beautiful bookshop Hopscotch that we work together with. Here in the corner, you see Tara Booth. She had a book lounge and a reading at Desert Island in New York. And here's like a poster of Olivier Schrauven, who also does very beautiful performances. I think he was in Ljubljana last year. And I hope he did a performance for you as well, because it's always quite beautiful, his music as well. And this is a little excerpt of the teaching that I do. Since last year, I teach a course that is called Critical Publishing, which sounds more theoretical then it is probably, well, yeah. But so I work with students from an architecture university, and through one semester they create their own, each creates their own publications of a topic of their choice. And it's basically just, I try to give them access to this like whole world of publishing. I think if you've never been to an art book fair or like a small fair, I think it's very hard for people to understand what it is that we actually all do there. So until today, I think my parents don't really understand what I do, and my siblings also don't really understand, because I think when you go there, it's there's like this special atmosphere. And also everyone that I meet there, is very rarely that someone I meet that is in publishing, a person that actually comes exactly from this field. A lot of times people are like coming from geography or from politics, or they did something completely different. And the one thing that kind of unifies all of them, I think, is this idea that they want to work autonomous and they want to work in a community that is generous. Because if I'm being honest, there is not really like a lot of money in publishing, and there's not really a lot of money in making comic books. So I think everyone who is involved in this field shares all the resources that they have, because they know that this is the only way that we can all help to keep afloat, basically, right? And so a lot of things that I learned about printing, about publishing, about bookbinding is from other publishers and other printers. It's not something I learned at university. It's not even like, you know, it's really something that I learned from someone also like Zoran, for example, from Riso Paradiso or Look Back and Laugh, you know, and you share and teach each other these little tricks, and then you connect with these people worldwide. And yeah, so it's very interesting for me to work at the university, because it's like a world that I'm kind of like very skeptical about also, because I think this kind of hierarchical system that you have this one professor or this one teacher who basically teaches you how you should do your work. It's like not really how I understand how I want community or learning to work like. And this is also why last year I founded this the Colorama Workshop, which is one of these million sub-Colorama projects that I did. And I founded this together with Loria Joan. She's a bookbinder from Canada, and she actually studied publishing, so she knows more about the theoretical bits of it. And so this is in an abandoned building in the middle of Berlin, where we could have this small, unheated, tiny, cold space for a year. And we just put like 2 old printers in there, and we did workshops with people for very little money, because we thought riso printing is quite, you know, it is material wise, it's not that expensive, but what people actually like, the time that you need to put into it is a lot. So we tried this kind of system where we said everyone can pay according to the resources that they have. So people really had to reflect on how much money they have, and if they think they should give more or a little bit less. And then we did different workshops and taught people how to print, and also help people to realize small publications they wanted to do. And we moved out of the space into a new one, which I will show in a second. I mean, there's not much to see yet, but yeah. So yeah, the project, from all of the projects that I do, that is probably the most dear to me is the Clubhouse Residency. And it's a project I host together with Aisha Franz. And the Clubhouse Residency is basically came from this idea that here you see small clubhouses and bigger clubhouses. It started with this idea that we have this big community of illustrators and artists and graphic designers in Berlin, but they are all very spread out through the city. They don't really know each other. And we wanted to create a platform where they could meet and exchange their ideas and connect. So we made these, every couple of months, we made these meetings where we chose 5 different artists that didn't know each other before, and they made a little zine together. And it was kind of this concept of call and response. So one person made a poster like you see on the left, and then the other person made a comic narrative on the right. This is also similar to the workshop we did yesterday with people in the gallery. And this was actually really successful, and people really liked that they got to know so many new people. And so we said we want to make it bigger, and we want to make it accessible for people who maybe don't live in Berlin. So we started with the, here's another example. We started with the Clubhouse Week. And Clubhouse Week was literally in the beginning a week where we invited international artists to come to Berlin and to work on a big book together. And these people, it was kind of the same concept. We asked a group of artists to contribute posters remotely. And then all the other artists actually came to Berlin, and then they worked on the narratives that were in response to the poster. And the idea was basically that if you're like an artist, then you kind of maybe an illustrator, you kind of like refine your style, and you maybe also have like certain topics that you work on continuously. And sometimes it's nice to get like a spark from the outside, like an idea or a topic you usually would never work with, or a character that you would never think, you wouldn't really know, you would never come up with this character yourself. So we thought it's nice that you have this poster that will give you this little idea of what your comic could be about. Yes, and so the Clubhouse Week is basically like a comic summer camp where we all hang out and draw together, and then we make little trips to here, Peacock Island in Potsdam, and we eat and cook together, and we do parties and tattoos and whatnot. And then in the end, we have to put together the whole book, which usually is like really, really, really big in work to do. There's a few more details for you of how we do it. And the thing is, it got more elaborate each year that we did it. So the first year we kind of like improvised a lot. And now Aisha and me are both at this point that we say like, okay, it was a lot of fun to do it, but when we do it again, we want to do it more professionally, because I think this is like a big part of me as a publisher and printer. I constantly try to think about if I kind of like how I can evolve as a publisher, basically. So in the beginning, when I published, for example, I noticed that I mostly published men. And then Aisha and me, we asked ourselves, like, why do I always publish men? And why do we always invite men to our workshops and to the clubhouses? And then we thought, okay, we really have to look out for it. We really have to search for female or non-binary artists. So we really tried to do this actively. And then the next thing that of course came up was like that we realized, I mean, Aisha is a person of color, but we realized that mostly we work with white artists. And then we also saw, when you look at the universities in Berlin, I think sometimes a whole illustration class, there is only like white people in this art class. And then we asked ourselves, how does this happen? And how can we like create a different structure, and how can we encourage people outside of these academic settings basically to come and work with us and learn and so on. Yeah, so there's more like snapshots from us having a good time and an overview of the book. You can look at the whole book in the gallery. Yes, some covers. I'm not showing too much of the book because you can look at the book. It's a better experience than the screen. Check, check, check. Yes. So here's a bit of the process. They always have a bit of time before to prepare what they want to do during this time that they're in Berlin, because it's very hard to do like an 8-page proper beautiful comic in such a short time. But then most of the things they do while they're there. This is like the printing plan, which is always insane. The printing plan, basically, the previous years, it was always that I would print until like 10 p.m. and then Molly would print from 10 p.m. until like 5 a.m. and then I would come back at 5 and I would continue printing. And these things you can do like 1 or 2 years, but now I'm too old. I can't I can't do it anymore this way. Yeah, we hang out, of course. It looks very beautiful, and I have to say, it's not just the photos. It is a very beautiful experience. So, yeah. And this is the last two photos I wanted to show. This year, I made this big Colorama birthday party in Hopscotch, the backyard of this bookshop that I work with a lot. And we basically showed all the books I ever published and made this little installation. And then we did like live silkscreen printing. This is Margot, my intern from the last half year. And we hung all of the clothes from the Melek collection, the fashion collection we did. I think I don't have time to get into that, but yeah. Yes, and this is the last photo. It's kind of like brand new, that after 6 years that finally I found like an affordable, beautiful, secure space where I moved 2 weeks ago. And we are now in the process of actually building everything up. So all the hundreds and thousands of books that I have laying around, all the machines, and we could finally bring everything together in this space, which I think might be open to visit in a couple of weeks. And this is what I'm doing basically every day right now. Yeah, so that's it. Am I in time? I don't know.
Well, thank you a lot, Johanna. Do we maybe have some questions from the audience for Johanna? Okay. If not, I would please like to ask you, we have just time for one short question, but could you maybe explain for us, our audience, a little bit more into specifics what actually riso printing is, how it is different from other forms of printing?
Yes. So I always think that I always imagine that everyone knows what riso printing is, but this is just my little bubble. So riso printing is a machine that was invented in Japan in the 80s, and it looks like a copy machine. It is basically like a Xerox machine. It is, you can imagine it's like a mix of silkscreen printing and offset printing. So you have, for each color that you want to print, the printer needs to create a separate stencil, and the stencil will be printed flat onto the paper. So if you want to print something with several colors, you have to make several print runs to print the colors on top of each other. And the ink is based on soy. It has like a little bit, it looks a little bit dusty. So when you, it actually is like an ink. When you have it out, it looks a bit like a liquid acrylic ink. So when it's printed onto the paper, it also leaves the sort of like texture on the paper. So you can really see that it's printed onto the paper. And yes, initially it was meant just more for like flyers or leaflets or something, but yeah, now in the last 20 years or longer, it had become something that is used by artists, but it brings some restrictions with it. Like, for example, you can maximum print on A3. There's also now bigger machines, but usually just on A3 paper. And you can also print only on uncoated paper, but there's always ways and tricks to work around it and to create beautiful books with it. I think the interesting thing about it is you can print very quick DIY punkish zines with it, but you can also print like very elaborate photo books or artist books that are like have an incredible color separation and quality to it, and it has this really wide range, and I think this is why it's so popular. Yeah.
But for the t-shirts, you're not using riso printing?
No. You can only print on paper. For t-shirts, that's actually silkscreen printing that we're using. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Maybe now some questions from the audience? No? If no, then Johanna, thank you very much for this introduction, and I'm hoping we see each other in person as well one day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So you see, there were people in the audience.
Okay, thanks.
Johanna, thank you. All of you, I would also like to invite you for another conversation. In 15 minutes, we'll be back here with the presentation of new comic from band Dubioza Kolektiv. Tako da vse ostale, ki bi se želeli vrniti nazaj, vas vabim nazaj čez 15 minut, ko bo tukaj potekal pogovor o novom oziroma prvem stripu benda Dubioza Kolektiv, ki je danes z nami tudi na stojnici. Hvala lepa za obisk. Thank you. Bye.